Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. I'm on the wrong side. Today, we're going to go over my character. In fact, you know what? I'll stay on this side. I'll just flip myself around. And we're going to go over my character and talk about what I did to level up, my build, and how it works, like my methodology and things like that. Let's go ahead and flip me here. So basically, my character is a build that I created on launch day. I theorycraft this. So if you wanted to take a look at my theorycraft on this, you can. It's on the launch day video. Before the actual launch of the game, I sat there and theorycrafted for quite some time to try and figure out exactly what I wanted to do with this Necromancer. And I came to a pretty solid idea, but of course it wasn't fully formed, and I didn't have the legendary items that I was going to have, like, as I leveled up my character. I kind of had to make things work. Now, what I'd like to do today is go over my Necromancer, including my really cool shield that I found, where I think I actually took off my shield recently because I had found a better, dude. But my shield is so freaking cool, and I don't want to take it off, but I probably will still end up taking it off. Honestly, I kind of really like the shields. Like, I really do. The shield that I found has just a really cool graphic, and I'm gonna show it to you because I like the shield, and I like it a lot. I'm put it on real quick. Let's go into the wardrobe so you can see my beautiful shield. Yes, my shield. I found this shield. This is not like something bought from the store or something. It's just a really cool looking shield, and I freaking love it. And I'm probably gonna have to deconstruct it at some point, which is gonna be sad. But at least I'll get access to the graphic, which is what I would like. I did end up replacing it with this one only because this is higher damage output. As you can see from my attack power, it's 838 with the shield, and it's 918 with this. So I actually do get quite a bump, and it doesn't consume my corpses anymore. But I kind of like the shield, so we're gonna put it on. So in this particular video, I'm just gonna take you over my character, and we're gonna talk about like how my character is built. Is my character like a really good character? I'm gonna save these items. These are items I want to make stuff out of, and I don't want to accidentally lose them. These are all the doojanks that I had that were really, really nice, and I need to hold on to them for further doojankery. And that's something you're going to go over as you level up your character, is you're going to have to go over every single item, and you're going to have to find stuff. Like this particular item that I found early on was a +2 ranks of Blood Mist, +2 ranks of Corpse Explosion, pair of pants. And even though I've far out-leveled the item level on this, I upgraded it because I really wanted to keep it. Like, as of right now, I think I've got items that are in the item level power of, in excess of 500 plus. Like my Mother's Embrace ring is currently 570 plus 15, so a hell of a lot higher than 456, almost 100 points higher. But let's talk about the skills first, and then we'll get into the equipment, because I feel like that's more important. So what basic skill did I take? The correct answer to that question is I basically took none. And you might be asking, how the hell can you take no basic skill because you need to build essence? Well, we'll go over that in the build. But I did eventually end up using Decompose just strictly for the ability to make corpses, and also because I found this ridiculous item very early on in the game, which was the Decompose can chain up to 2 additional targets. When Decompose spawns a corpse, it has a 33% chance, 30 to 60% chance to spawn a corpse under all afflicted targets, which is pretty darn nice. So that means basically you can get 3 corpses instead of 1, and it worked out really nice with the build that I'm doing, which I'll explain. My core skill that I chose specifically was Bone Spear, and the reason why I chose Bone Spear is because it can hit multiple targets, and it does pretty good single target damage. Goes well with the way that I wanted to build the Necromancer, and it was kind of fun. I did go with the Bone Spear breaks into 3 shards, which is actually really fun, and if you've never seen that, it's actually a lot like the Javazon on Diablo II Resurrected. If you've never actually played a Javazon, I'll explain, but for those of you who know, you know. When you fire your projectile at a target, and let me just walk outside of town here. I believe this one will do. When it hits a wall or a hard object of any type, just like Lightning Fury, it fires back projectiles. So it actually fires the projectiles back like when it touches a wall, which is actually really cool, and it's a pretty neat mechanic that you can take advantage of. So for instance, like this, you notice that 3 additional spears come out. So it allows you to take advantage of hard cover and things like that, which I really did enjoy. And then as far as these two goes, with the Bone Spear makes them vulnerable or the Bone Spear has increased crit chance, it was a no-brainer because I'm going with crit. This is a crit build. In fact, Bone Spear tends to be a skill that you definitely want to get as much crit as humanly possible because it's based around crit. Now, I think I do have some form of vulnerability based in here somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but it's in here somewhere. I definitely wanted to have at least 1 or 2 forms of making enemies vulnerable. Moving on to the passive, I did end up getting Hued Flesh. Now, disclaimer, I didn't get this in the beginning because I didn't really have enough points. There's definitely a point deprivation thing going on early on in the game, but eventually I did max this out because, number 1, it gives me a huge number of corpses versus large amounts of enemies, and number 2, it gives me a very good amount of corpses versus bosses, which is absolutely great when you're actually fighting, you know, like big monsters that don't really have a lot of corpses spawning on a regular basis. So absolutely a great ability, but probably not something you're going to dump points into early on. Next, I did end up putting 1 point into Blood Mist, just 1 point, and grabbing the Corpse Creator so that I could create corpses early on. It was the easiest way for me to create corpses early on for what I needed. And, of course, I also eventually found the shield, which has the Blood Mist cooldown on it, which was actually really nice, which allowed me to spam it a little bit more to get more corpses. Honestly, it's just a really good defensive cooldown. And even if you don't end up using the corpses, it's probably still a good idea to get this. It's probably still a good idea just to grab 1 point into it, just so you have a defensive cooldown. Even if you're not going to dump points into it, even if you're not going to get the passives or go up the tree for any of this stuff, just as defensive cooldown, it's great. Then I got Corpse Explosion. Now, I originally only put 1 point into Corpse Explosion. So, disclaimer here, I did not max it out. And I ended up flipping and flopping back and forth between the Blighted Corpse Explosion and the Plagued Corpse Explosion. And my particular view on this is that the Plagued Corpse Explosion tends to work much better versus like big groups of monsters, like garbage monsters is what I would call it, like, you know, trash mobs. And this one seems to work a hell of a lot better versus bosses, because of course the bosses sit still, and then the blight stands underneath of them over 6 seconds, and it does out a really good amount of damage over a prolonged period of time. It seems to be a pretty good damage dealer. Now, I did eventually max this out after I leveled up quite a bit, but early on in the game, I did not have more than 1 point in this, with of course the passives. I immediately leveled up Skeleton Warrior, so this was one of the first things that I leveled up upon reaching the Corpse and Macabre skills, is basically just immediately grabbed Skeleton Warrior Master 3. And the reason why I did this, because I wanted to have a very nice army full of Doojanks. Now, one of the ways I can make my army really quickly is I just use the blood skill just to get the free corpses. So that's why the shield is sometimes not beneficial in this particular case, because it burns up the corpses as you teleport around. So if you're specifically just trying to use Blood Mist for no other reason other than to get 3 free corpses, which is how many corpses it spawns, you kind of want to take that item off while you're doing your build. Then I ended up going with the passive. Now, this is the key to this particular build and why I'm not using an actual builder. And this involves the Grim Harvest passive. So what this does is at level 1, it's 3 essence. At level 2, it's 6. And at level 3, it's 9 essence, okay? Any corpse that I consume will generate essence. So, to give you an example, I'm going to go ahead and make 3 corpses here. And I'm going to burn all my essence away. Alright. Anytime I consume a corpse, even if it's just making a skeleton, you can see I'm gaining essence. The goal of this particular build, is to replace the builder with the activities of consuming corpses. So I want to make it so that anytime I explode a corpse, anytime I use a corpse to make a skeleton warrior, anytime I use a corpse to make a skeleton mage, anytime I use a corpse to make a skeleton priest, anytime I consume a corpse in any way, shape, or form, including using the Blood Mist legendary, which allows you to explode the corpses as you travel with Blood Mist, I am gaining essence upon every single use of a corpse. This means that I'm gaining 9 essence all the time for every single activity that I do with the corpses, and I don't have to use Decompose very often at all to do much of anything. In fact, the only time I really would use Decompose is when I was out of essence and I was out of corpses both. And the only reason I ended up getting the Acolyte's Decompose is because it does have the minions damage on it. But if you want, you don't have to build this one all. You can take that one out and you could put that one somewhere else, because you only need 2 points in this tree to actually move on to the next tree. So it's up to you. You can just do the 2, or you can grab the third one, which will give you the slows enemy, which the slows enemy is actually really nice, or the minion damage. I didn't use it enough for the slows damage, because I feel like most of the time I wasn't actually utilizing it, so I went with the minion damage, so at least it was doing something while I was using it. But I don't know. That could go either way, and I'm still making decisions on that. The next one, which I definitely want, but I don't have enough skill points right now, is the Fueled by Death. This one is actually a no-brainer for this particular build, because if you're going to go with a corpse build, where you're constantly popping corpses in Corpse Explosion, or using them for various things, you're going to want the damage bonus for every single time you use a corpse. It basically gives you a nice little damage bonus anytime you use any corpse. And it pops up at the bottom here. So again, let me just show you really quickly. So we have one corpse right here, right? And you can see it dealing bonus damage is already up there. So when I consume this corpse, we get our 6-second bonus damage. And you can just keep that up pretty much indefinitely as this particular character. Because basically all you're doing is you're just going to keep firing off your bone, all of your corpse abilities all the time. So you should technically have this up on a regular basis, the damage bonus. Now, I wouldn't prioritize it over other things, and the reason why I wouldn't prioritize it over other things is because it's just a small damage bump. But eventually, you definitely want to max it out with this particular build. Then moving on to the next part of the tree is the curse skills. I actually did not pull a curse. It's really because I ran out of skill assignment slots. As you can clearly see, I've got Corpse Explosion, Blood Mist, Bone Storm, Raised Skeleton, Decompose, and Bone Spear. And I didn't even take a Golem because, to be honest with you, I couldn't. I literally couldn't take a Golem because the Golem would have taken up one more slot that I needed for what I needed to do. Now, granted, I could have taken away Decompose to grab the Golem, or taken away Decompose to grab one of the curses, but I found that I did need Decompose sometimes to generate the initial corpses to jumpstart the engine of the corpse generator. So in other words, basically what I was doing was if there were no corpses on the ground whatsoever, and say Blood Mist was on cooldown also, I would start attacking the boss with Decompose, start putting some of those corpses on the ground, because of course this ability literally forms a corpse once every 2.5 seconds, and with the legendary item that I have, it can potentially form more depending on how many monsters are around. So I'm looking at the ability to jumpstart the whole Corpse Explosion engine, and then once I get that engine running, then I'm pulling 9 essence every single time. So I didn't really have a spot for it, unfortunately. I really probably would have grabbed Decrepify because of the nice slows and things that it has. And it does have, like stuns and other cool doojanks as well. And who knows, maybe eventually I'll work it in if I can get my essence completely fixed. Now that I have 3 points into Hued Flesh, it might not be a big problem, and I might be able to pull those points out and grab Decrepify and remove Decompose entirely. Then down in this tree, I did end up with 1 point in Corpse Tendrils from some skill items, and I used it a little bit, but for the most part, it wasn't really like a main ability. Bone Spirit, I kind of ignored entirely because I didn't want to burn all my essence every single time I fired it. My whole build was focused around essence generation in an alternative way, so I didn't want to burn all my essence every single time I didn't have essence. I also grabbed the passives for the Bone Tree. So my entire idea with Bone Spear is to go with a crit build. I wanted to get as much crit as I possibly could. And so we went with the Serration passive, which gives us the 1.5% increased critical strike chance for each 10 essence you have upon cast. And thankfully, due to the fact that our corpse explosions and all corpse-related activities tend to increase our essence dramatically, we tend to have pretty full essence usually, which means we get pretty nice crit chances. I also grabbed the Compound Fracture, which is after critically striking 10 times with Bone Skills. Your Bone Skills deal 15% increased damage. And then I plan to eventually max this one, but I haven't yet, which is the Your Bone Skills deal 6% increased to critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Now, one of the cool things about the vulnerable buffs is that I've noticed that when you're in group play, it doesn't really matter all that much that you have vulnerability. I mean, you would like to have it. You definitely want to have it for your build. But, like, everybody seems to have a vulnerable effect of some type. So taking advantage of at least the vulnerabilities that other people are creating is certainly not a bad thing. And in group play, like, it seems like the monsters are always vulnerable. I will eventually max that out once I get more points, but I still need to min-max the build, of course. Then down here at the bottom of the tree, I did end up with... Oh, I accidentally pulled my points out. I did end up with Bone Storm, and the reason why I ended up with Bone Storm is because I really like this passive, which is your critical strike chance is increased by 20% while Bone Storm is active, because basically anytime I would use Bone Storm, that would give me a huge crit, which would, of course, give me tons of damage for, you know, this particular part of the tree and the Bone Spear, so that I would have a main damage dealer of some type. And giving me a huge crit chance bonus is really nice. I was also utilizing the minions. We'll go over those in a minute. In this part of the tree, I did choose two passives, which was after you've been healthy for at least 4 seconds, you and your minions gain 12% increased attack speed. And then also the Death's Defense, which is your minions cannot lose more than 45% of their maximum life in a single instance. Now, this one was absolutely key to keeping my army alive. And the reason why I went with this one is just simply because it basically makes it so they can't be one-shot. They can't be two-shot, because 2 instances of 45% life is going to be 90, right? So they cannot be 1 or 2-shot. They can only be 3-shot, which means a monster has to hit them for 45% of their life, then 45% of their life, and then another 10% of their life with the third hit, which basically makes them a lot tankier in terms of survival, and just in general means I don't have to resurrect them as often. So more often than not, I'm spending points on the Skeletal Priest. Now, granted, I don't really like the Skeletal Priest. I think the Skeletal Priest sucks. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I think the Skeletal Priest sucks. But the cool thing is that with my bonded in my Grim Harvest ability, every single time I use the Skeletal Priest to heal my skeletons, I'm also getting Essence. So it just makes sense to spam that pretty much as I can to grow my Essence. Now, either I would be spamming the Skeletal Priest, or I would be spamming, of course, Corpse Explosion. Either one of those. Corpse Explosion, of course, if I needed to do damage, and Skeletal Priest if there was nothing nearby to do damage too. Then for my ultimate, my capstone, I actually ended up going with the minion capstone instead of the ossified essence. I didn't really particularly like the ossified essence. It seemed to be more based around like having maximum essence at all times, and I didn't want to go down that route, especially since I'm already kind of having issues with the maximum essence thing. So, like, you know, I'm trying to generate my essence in an alternative way, which can sometimes mean I don't have good essence at all. So I wouldn't really think that I would have good usefulness for this. So instead, I ended up going with the Kellen's Edict, which gives me a huge bonus for my minions of attack speed with it's doubled if I have more than a certain number of minions. So combined with the attack speed that I get here of 12% and the attack speed that I get here of 15%, which is doubled if I have 7 minions, which is 30%. As you can see, I currently have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so I have 10 minions, which means I'm usually over that 7 number pretty easily, and I have doubled attack speed on all my minions. And speaking of minions, let's go over the Book of the Dead. So I ended up going with the Skeletal Warrior Reapers, and the reason why I did that was for the corpse forming. Now, eventually, I might shy away from this and move more toward the skirmishers, because I'm doing a crit build, and I would really like to utilize the each time you critically strike, your skirmisher's next warrior attack will also critically strike and deal 50% bonus critical damage, because I feel like this particular effect would go very well with the Bone Spear aspect of things, which is basically allowing me to get massive amounts of crits all the time, and especially since I'm utilizing the Bone Storm passive to get the 20% crit chance, I have a very nice amount of crit. I mean, if I take a look at my panel here, I can probably pull up my crit. Critical strike chance is currently 10.7%. And then, of course, that raises as I actually use my abilities and attack and do things. And, of course, if I use my Bone Storm, now I'm at 30.7%. And I have some other abilities here and there that it can increase it more. Like, I'm trying to remember where my other Doojanks is. Don't remember where my other Doojanks is. I know there's a couple different things, like the one that doesn't show up is the passive, so it's 1.5% per 10 essence upon cast. So I get, what is that? If I cast at full essence, that's 10 times 1.5, which is 10.5% increase. So I'm looking at a total of, like, with Bone Storm active and full essence, I'm looking at like a 45+% crit chance, which is pretty damn nice. And then I have pretty good crit skill damage as well. So basically a whole crit build. That's the entire point of this. It's just crit build. And I've actually gone with items that have critical strike chance specifically to take advantage of that. As for my mages, I did end up going with the cold mages because I can get the frozen effect. And the reason why I went this way is because, number one, I can make it so that they make enemies vulnerable for 4 seconds, which is where I'm getting some of my vulnerability from. And also why I would eventually like to cap out the damage from vulnerability one here, Evulsion, which is definitely going to give me some pretty nice output. However, I definitely like this one too, which allows me to create essence. And I find myself often switching back and forth between these depending on whether I'm doing a boss fight or not. So boss fights I usually do with the essence. That way I can spam more bone spears. And anything else that's not a boss fight, I definitely prefer this. Although now that I've got a specific item, I might be using this one more often. As for the Golem, I actually ended up sacrificing him. Early on, I sacrificed the Bone Golem for the 10% increased attack speed, but I did eventually sacrifice the Iron Golem instead for the 30% increased critical strike damage because I am going with a crit build. Then on top of that, we also have my gear, so let's go over my equipment. Now, admittedly, a lot of this equipment you might not be able to find at given times. I was lucky enough to find a lot of these pieces. You could probably try and farm for them, but this is what I ended up with. So the helmet, I ended up with each time Bone Storm damages an enemy, you gain a barrier equal to 2% of your base life, which was a bottom roll of the 2 to 5. And basically, it just gives me a little bit of a barrier on Bone Storm when I use it, which makes it even more of a very important cooldown, because not only does it now increase my damage, but it also, as well, decreases the amount of damage that I take with the damage reduction is increased by 15% while Bone Storm is active. Then also I get the nice little barrier, which is actually pretty nice. So it ends up being a very nice defensive cooldown in my arsenal as well, which I can utilize at opportune times. I also happen to find 2 of the Skeletal Warrior mages, one in an amulet form, which I'm currently using, which increases my mages by 3, and one in a body form, which increases my mages by 2. Of course, the 3 is superseding this one, which I will eventually replace. The gloves I found really early on, and this one was an absolutely great passive because it allowed me to spawn lots of corpses at a time when I needed lots of corpses before I was able to really spawn all my own corpses. I may eventually replace this, but as you can see, it's a really nice pair of gloves with +2 Bone Spear and 3.9% crit strike. So it's kind of hard to replace the crit and the +2 Bone Spear, especially since Bone Spear is my main ability. It's currently at rank 7, which I'd like to get a little bit higher. I also found these really godlike pants at some point with 2 sockets, upgraded it 3 times, and it also has freaking +2 Blood Mist and +2 Corpse Explosion, which I think is absolutely amazing for my build. I mean, granted, I would like Bone Spear, but it also has 109 maximum life, and I really couldn't turn this pair of pants down. I'm eventually going to put a legendary aspect on these. But one thing I found out as I was leveling up, which I think is definitely something pertinent that I should show you guys, is that apparently once you get like a really high legendary item, so once the legendary item is actually like, I'm sorry, not a rare item, is a higher level, it does require specific doojanks to imprint the item, which has put a complete halt on me being able to imprint legendary effects, because every time I go over here to print a legendary effect, I am halted by it because I can't do it. So like for instance with these pants, I could go in here and pull all the damaging elite enemies, and so not this power. There's one power in here specifically that I was trying to do earlier, which is this one. Bone Spear's primary attack makes enemies vulnerable, which I definitely want, by the way. And I tried to put on an item, and I was met with this, Baleful Fragments, which I'm going to have to figure out how to get those. It says that you can get them from salvaging legendary weapons, so I'm assuming that it has to be a legendary weapon that you actually found. But I need 2 of those before I can imprint the aspect, so poopies. And you may come across this as well, like I've come across this several times, is that I'm trying to imprint legendary aspects to some of the higher eye level items, like in the 500 plus range, and it seems to require some pretty expensive doojanks. I also managed to find these really late in the game, so this isn't something that I found recently. This is a very, early on, this is a very recent find. I actually got this from the end of the campaign, so go figure. And this is every 10 seconds, your cold skeletal mages will cast a blizzard, dealing a pretty large amount of cold damage and chilling enemies for 8% over 6 seconds. Now, this was very awesome. Like, I have a lot of mages, okay? And they're cold mages anyway. I didn't have to change anything. And I absolutely love this legendary power because they just spam freaking blizzards on everything. And I gotta show you guys this because it's amazing. And like I said, I only recently got it, but it's just an absolutely amazing addition to this particular build. And I have my mount, by the way, which is beautiful. Don't be jealous of my mount.
Not while I'm in town.
Am I still in town? Let me out. Let me out. I just want to show you my beautiful blizzards. My beautiful blizzards. Whee! Look at my beautiful blizzard. Watch some do their jank. Get in there. Pew! And then they got blizzards that comes down and they go shoo doo 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 doo. Look at it. Look at it. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's and everything gets nice and frosty and frozen. And because they're already cold mages, there's tons of like freezing effects. I'm gonna have to get some things to take advantage of the freezing effects. Now, granted, the dang, we got a legendary. We got a freaking elite in here. What do you got? A shock lance. Dasaku. Let's get that crit running. Bye, buddy. Baby, bye, bye, bye. That's right. And my essence is full. Then I also ended up with this one later on, which is the basic skills increased cost of your next core skill. Damage of your next core skill cast by a certain percentage. It's not really that important. I'm probably going to end up replacing this one. The amulet was a really clutch one with the increased skeletal mages, and then I also ended up with the skills increased damage based on your primary resource, which is nice. I'll probably end up replacing that with something else later. And of course I got this one, which I just made the unique item video for, which should be up before this video, which is the Mother's Embrace. And it's a pretty cool one that actually works really well, synergizes really well with Bone Spear that hits multiple targets. So as long as you hit 5 targets or more, you get a refund to your resource cost. And unfortunately mine did bottom roll, which was absolutely crappy. But it's still a pretty nice 5 essence return as long as I hit 5 or more enemies, which is fun because the whole piercing target minigame is, just a very cool part of the game. Then I also have the legendary shield, which gave me the Blood Mist Corpse explosion trigger. Now, this is really just a way to reduce the cooldown on Blood Mist. They definitely nerfed it heavily from the beta, but it's still kind of fun to, go around on your Blood Mist and dish out some interesting damage. Overall, I'm very pleased with my Necromancer. I had a lot of fun leveling up in the campaign, and I plan to do another live stream, obviously, later. And this video is probably going to go up after that live stream, so you can check out that live stream when it goes live, or you know, afterwards, after it goes into a VOD, I guess. I think that's pretty much it. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but this has been really fun. I've really enjoyed my Necromancer. I feel like he's been a very powerful character. A lot of the times when I left my group, they would die, and they're like, "We need the minions," and I would come back and save the day, so to speak. And as soon as I arrived, everything would stabilize back again because we were doing pretty good synergistic, things. Like I was holding everything back, the minions were doing their job. I'm dishing out my damage from the back scene, so to speak, and then they're hiding behind the minions trying to stay alive, which definitely allows them to build a little bit more damage output than tanky because, well, the minions are taking a lot of the brunt of the damage, and all I have to do is keep them alive and fire out my shots. And the cool thing is that I turned keeping them alive into a mini game, which increases my essence. So the more I keep them alive, the more my essence generates, and so it just makes sense. Because instead of generating essence and then they're dead, and then I got to switch over to resurrecting them, and then I got to go back to generating essence, like it's all one fluid movement of I'm keeping them alive and generating essence at the same time. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.